Welcome to the Fed, the fourth estate domain, which is actually brought to you by Love Alta and also the Tomorrow Asia, Mike Walsh's company. A few thank yous before we crack on this evening, and that's thank you to Mass Media and to Traction and to Viacorp for their continued support, because we just couldn't do it without you, so thank you. And a big thank you also to Fever Pitch Entertainment, to Steve and Jonathan. Those guys are film, TV and web-based content creators. Hopefully I've got that right. And they're filming this evening for us, so cheers. So without further ado, on the infamous couch this evening with Martin Dalgleish, who's infamous also, we'd love to welcome, well, please welcome, Scott Lorson, CEO, FetchTV. Thank you very much.
Scott, welcome.
Thank
to
you.
the couch.
Before
Scott,
you start, I must say I've got very high hopes for this interview. For those of you who don't know, this is the third time Martin's interviewed me. The first two were for jobs, and I got pay increases, and
okay, well, this one will be a bit harder, Scott,
okay.
right? So we're not going to let you off too lightly. Now, a couple of things here first of all. I think we'll mix the format up today. Ordinarily what we would do is speak here for about half an hour and then throw questions to the floor. I might actually change that slightly. We'll talk for 15, 20 minutes, have some questions, have more of a chat, and have questions at the end. So just to kind of mix it up, because I know there's a lot of people here who are looking to ask you a few questions, Scott, so that could be interesting. So if you don't mind, we'll do it that way.
Certainly.
So let's talk about FetchTV. Oh, let's talk about you, actually, to start with. So your background, long and varied, but Optus to PBL, of course you were at Ticketek for many years, ACP.
11 months.
11 months. And then you ended up at FetchTV, and people said, who the hell's FetchTV? So what took you there, and what was exciting about FetchTV that got your interest?
Well, it was interesting. I just left ACP, and I was doing my 6 months of requisite gardening leave at the time. Got a phone call from Astra All Asian Networks in KL, and asked me if I could get up there to talk about a job opportunity. It just so happened the next day I was meant to be in Singapore on my way to my sister's wedding in France. So I just popped up, had a quick chat. They were talking to me about a job in Dubai, and about halfway through the interview, I said to Ralph Marshall, the CEO of Astro, I don't think we're talking about Dubai anymore. What are you talking about? And he mentioned this business that they have going in Australia. And I pride myself in knowing you and knowing what's going on in the industry. And the more he described it, I just found it almost unbelievable that someone had come so far so quickly, and I hadn't heard of them. So after the wedding, he suggested I go back and meet with the founders, Gary Walker and Simon Cathcart. I went into the office, had a chat, heard their story, heard their vision, and I just really believed in it. And it was the first opportunity to do a startup. I think you've got one or two in your life. And you know, it just had all the ingredients to something that I thought had a great chance to be successful. And I was there working the next day.
Fantastic. And so now we are, what, about 16,
18
months?
18 3 years for the company.
Okay, interesting. So let's talk about its origins. So Astro, just for everyone's benefit, explain who Astro is.
Okay, so Astro All Asia Networks is a regional telco broadcast media company. Their parent company is Usaha Goss. In the region, they're owned by one individual based in Malaysia, but they have a range of mobile assets. So Aircel in India, Maxis in Malaysia, NTS in Indonesia, Sri Lanka Telecom, they have management control of that business. And in the pay TV space, Sun TV in India, a DTH satellite provider, Astro in Malaysia, Brunei TV, the Sri Lanka business, also a joint venture with Saudi Telecom called Integral, which does the pay TV there. So a huge regional portfolio, but no exposure in Australia, New Zealand.
So you say huge, but just give everyone a sense of how huge that is relative to, say, Foxtel in this market.
Well, I guess if you look at, obviously India is a fast-growing market, but in India, Sun TV would add a company the size of All-Star about every 35 days. So we're talking about significant growth. I was saying Aircel had 40 million mobile subscribers the other day, and I got the update and it was 60 million. So these are big numbers.
So you're out by the population of Australia. Exactly. Yep. Okay. So we've got a big powerhouse pay television, broad integrated telco in Asia looking to do an IPTV business in Australia. Why would that be?
Look, the CEO and the owner of the group have very tight ties to Australia. have had an interest in this market for a long time. Made a run a few years back at All-Star and have looked at entering the market different ways. I think they recognized it was going to be very difficult to get in through All-Star, just on a price multiple discussion. Obviously, Foxtel has a very complex ownership structure. So IPTV really seemed to be the best way forward. The gentleman who was running corporate finance for the group at the time was an Australian with a young family. He saw the business case and the idea and really wanted to come and give it a shot to make it happen. So Simon Cathcart came into the business, invested his own money, got it up and running. I think he probably had a pretty clear understanding that if he was successful in getting it started, that the group would be an early investor and be very supportive, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay. So is Simon here tonight, by the way?
No, he's
probably in Malaysia or somewhere. Interesting. So what is FetchTV then? How do you describe the business model?
Okay, well, first of all, we're not a retailer. So one of the reasons you probably haven't seen the brand out very, very frequently is we wholesale only. So we have no relationship with the customer. We're effectively a pay TV wholesaler who just happens to deliver via IP. So if you take a look at your cable TVs in the US or even an Optus or Telstra delivered service here, Foxtel over Telstra, there's an RF delivery of a linear closed network signal getting to a set-top box to a TV. We do a very similar thing. We just happen to deliver a closed network linear pay TV service using IP packets instead of RF.
So you're not pay TV over the internet, just to clarify that point. You're a closed network as distinct from a public open network.
Absolutely. And I don't want to get too technical, but I guess the important distinction is generally when people talk about web TV or TV over the internet, they're talking about a one-to-one communication. It's a unicast delivery, generally over the top, which is network agnostic, on a best endeavors basis. So if you use a YouTube example or an iView, etc., someone at home sees some piece of content, click play or stream, it travels through the internet with the request and pulls it down from a server. We are effectively a broadcaster. It's a one-to-many delivery, which is far more efficient for the ISPs, but it allows us to do true linear content with quality of service guaranteed. So the type of content that you'll see, both in the type of channels, but in the quality of those channels, looks identical to what you would expect from a satellite or a cable provider.
So the best way for a consumer to understand it is it's effectively pay television as they understand it, delivered over an IP network, but they don't care about that.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so it comes over their broadband service into the home.
So once you turn it on, it looks and feels like pay TV.
So what's the secret sauce of the business then? Is it the ability to deliver that content with that quality over the network? Is that what's unique about it, or is that a generally available technology that anyone can deploy?
No, I guess if you're going to use a closed network, you're not going to be network agnostic, and you want quality of service guaranteed, and you want to be unmetered, which is obviously critical for linear content. The first thing you realize very quickly is you better be in partnership with the ISPs, because they're the only ones that can enable that. So the reason that we're only a wholesaler is we recognized very early on that the only hope we had for this business to take off was to develop deep partnerships with the ISPs, and what we like to refer to as the coalition of the willing. So there's a lot of ISPs out there very successful who are not Telstra, don't have the same content assets, and are looking for ways to enter the market.
So to take that analogy further, are you effectively the T-Box of all the non-Telstra ISPs?
I think from a business model perspective, we certainly see our service as differentiated versus the T-Box, but that would be the closest fair comparison. The triple play, the way in which Telstra has very successfully bundled the T-Box in with their customers, the ISP-led, the ISP customer relationship, a single bundled price, that is absolutely what we're trying to do.
So they're quoting subscriber numbers, 120-odd thousand, I think was the last number I saw. So they've done very well in a very short period of time.
Absolutely. In fact, our entire reason for being is to help the people that need to compete with Telstra. Okay. So ironically, the better the Telstra results, the more successful we are as a business.
So if you're iiNet, which is one of your partners, sitting here today, you are competing for a triple play. Telstra's obviously got a competitive offering. You need a pay television service. So why didn't iiNet, Optus, Internode, Adamnet, Westnet, TPG, why haven't they gone out and got their own pay television service, which is uniquely theirs?
Well, I just might take one step back, Martin, and then answer that question, if that's all right. So I guess the first question we get asked frequently is, why do these companies want to be in pay TV? There's a lot of carcasses around the world for telcos that have tried to enter pay TV, many unsuccessfully. But the market has moved on in the last 3 or 4 years. So the first thing you know is that fixed line broadband growth is stagnating. There's very little growth left. And what that effectively means is the days of getting the strong revenue growth from all the new to markets are gone. Churn is a bigger issue. Yields are under pressure because market share competition is coming into the market, and they're looking for a way to grow and to protect their bases. They look around the world for inspiration, and everywhere you go, whether it's free in France, FastWeb in Italy, PCCW in Hong Kong, or BT, Verizon, etc., Mio in Singapore, everyone's moving to the triple play. And I think there's a collective recognition that if you're going to be successful in fixed line telephony and broadband, you need to be part of a triple play. The NBN further compounds that because you're going to have content to differentiate it in a post-NBN world. And there is a real threat of Foxtel and Austar becoming true triple play providers in their own right. Now, I appreciate their shareholder covenants and other things to consider there. But if you switch to fiber from satellite, if you look at the wholesale structure of the NBN, it certainly makes sense to provide all three services. So that what used to be a fairly compatible relationship between a pay TV satellite provider and a fixed line, they recognize a strategic threat. I think the options for them are obviously to partner with the incumbent, a Foxtel or Telstra,
Sure.
and there are competition and ownership issues there. They can certainly do it themselves. The question is it worth the risk? Is it worth the time? And can they get the content? And I think collectively, these players have about 65% market share of broadband in the metro markets. But individually, I guess we would argue that each of them is individually too small to justify the investment. So that's where we fit in. We're trying to put together this coalition to provide an agnostic, ISP agnostic service that allows them to enter the three-play world, compete with Telstra, and that's our purpose in life.
And presumably your Astro shareholding allows you to get access to the content owners in a way that would be difficult for any of the local ISPs to have that relationship.
It certainly helps in those discussions when you write a big check in another market.
Yep.
And obviously they know the group. We're one of the biggest, if not their biggest customer in Asia. So those are conversations that we actually have locally. We contract locally, but we do it as part of what is a very clear relationship.
So how did the content owners embrace you, or did they see you initially as just yet another startup with ambition, or did they genuinely understand the kind of Astro relationship and they were seeking to engage with you from a very early stage?
I'll share my view because none of them would say this, but I think Australia and New Zealand as well is a very difficult market for an international content player. What you obviously want is high market penetration. This market after 15 years is at 30 installed, and you want competition so that your content, there's a bit of competitive tension. If you take a look at Australia, New Zealand, you have much higher penetration in New Zealand, about 30% here, but very little competition for those rights. So there is an appetite in the content space to have some competition, to have someone stimulate take-up, and to drive. I think there's a recognition that the price points in this market are too high. They're 15% higher than any other market in the OECD. So, I think that we fit a nice niche for them. The fact that they know the parent, that we're expanding with them in the region certainly helps. Something that's probably less understood is that they really like our delivery model. From a DRM perspective, it's closed network. We use Verimatrix encryption. We don't have to worry about geocoding issues, et cetera. So we tick lots of the digital rights management issues, which is critical to all of them.
So you're a credible player, you had a credible parent, you bring a change to the industry structure, but at the end of the day, they've also got to write the check. They've also got Foxtel, and you've got to write a check. Yep. They've also got Foxtel here, of course, who are pretty important to them. So I gather in the very early days they were struggling with that kind of balance of disrupting that relationship versus being seen to be embracing the new entrant.
Yeah, look, it was very tricky to get the first 3 or 4 contracts, and each of them wanted to make sure that the other one was on. You don't want to be the only person supporting a challenger brand. So our first press release, the first time we announced a content relationship, we announced 8 at the same time. Right. So I think that tells you how sensitive we were to the issue and how sensitive they were to the issue.
Pick up on your term around the coalition of the willing. So in order to have a coalition, you need a coalition. Obviously, that's a fairly profound statement, isn't it? So, as I understand it now, IINet, obviously, who have been reasonably aggressive. I think we've all seen the FetchTV marketing that they've been offering in the marketplace. But who else are your current distribution partners?
So in iNet, they've been very aggressive from an acquisition perspective. So we will very shortly be launching with Westnet, which is another brand they own. Short after that, NetSpace. We hope by the end of the year, AAPT. So those are 4 brands that are owned by iNet. In the next 60 days, we'll be launching with Atom Internet in Adelaide. And for those of you not familiar with Atom, they really have a dominant market share in that particular market. Great network, fantastic customer base. Internode, who's supporting us with the door prize tonight, fantastic operator, one of the few owned by a single individual private ISPs. We are in talks with everyone. I think that's pretty well known, and we want to build the coalition. So we wake up every morning and we spend time.
So this is a bit like NATO and Libya, isn't it, in a way? Everybody wants to kind of be there, but they're not sure how to kind of lead the way, right?
Just hoping the Russian and the Chinese don't block
Yeah.
that.
So for I mean, fairly obviously, the big parties in the coalition that aren't in the coalition, Optus, TPG, Dodo, probably from a market share, I think collectively they probably represent 30-35% of the total broadband market today. So they've got to be first prize for you to get that distribution.
Look, I think everyone has different motivations what they want to do with pay TV, and iNet's an extremely attractive partner for us. TPG and Optus would absolutely be as well. You know, I think I've worked for the type of people in my career. There's 2 types of contracts: the ones that you've got signed and the ones you don't. So in case of Optus and TPG, that is not signed, which is one of the questions. But you know, you can be assured that we built this model for companies like Optus, like TPG, like Dodo, like Primus, like Transact, Neighborhood Cable. Clearly, everyone who is not Telstra that owns infrastructure, and I only say not Telstra because they're spoken for clearly, we would like to bring into the coalition.
So they better hurry up, right? Because you've got Telstra out there doing 120,000 odd subs and seemingly doing that without too much effort. I mean, you know, I don't see too much T-Box advertising. I don't know if anyone else does, but if you go into a Telstra T-Live store, you can see the product. It's not a great product. I think that would be a reasonable statement to make, unless anybody vehemently from Telstra disagrees here. But it's still selling incredibly well. Your product, and I don't know how many people here have seen FetchTV. Quick show of hands if you have or have it. Just a small amount, right? So most people here broadly are unfamiliar with your product. Are you a better offering than T-Box? What's your point of difference?
Yeah, look, I guess if you do a direct comparison, first of all, both of them deliver a fantastic PVR, personal video recorder, and this is a wonderful technology. It's a bit like you and I, if we could go back in the 90s in telco and get into open a mobile phone store. You know, once you have a mobile phone, you never go back, and the same is true with the PVR. I've never met. Is there anyone in this room who's had a PVR but doesn't have one now? We've got one. 2.
Right, go.
So we absolutely think the PVR is critical. We made a very aggressive decision, which was to launch our set-top box with a very advanced chipset with 512 RAM, but more importantly, to launch with a 1 terabyte hard drive. Just to put that in perspective, the Foxtel MyStar, T-Box, TiVo, those sort of ones are all about 320 gigabyte, so about 3 times the standard. We also recognized that the number of tuners in the box was quite an important decision. So most have 2, and you can record and watch, but the free-to-airs like to play that game. MasterChef ends at 8:36, Underbelly starts at 8. You get that horrible 6 minutes of contention where you're either going to miss the end of one of your shows or the start of the others. So we spent the money and put the 3rd tuner in the box. So from a hardware perspective, we believe we've got the best PVR in the market, and that was a key thing. From a movie perspective, you know, Australians rent more videos, more movies than per capita than any other country in the world. And actually, it's true I was in magazines. More magazines consumed. I used to run Acer Arena. It's the 3rd most trafficked, one of the biggest concert venue countries. Australians consume.
I work for a bigger company. Same. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we knew that if we were going to try to replicate or replace the video store, it wasn't about saying we have movies to download. People, if they're going to tear up that card, they need to know that every new release, the entire left side of that video store is going to be available in the pay-per-view window. So one of the other big decisions we made is we went and signed every single studio that theatrically releases in this market, or at least that I'm aware of. And that cost a lot of money. I mean, obviously, it took a lot of time as well. We think the content offering's fantastic. I think the thing that will probably differentiate us in the next 60 days versus the others is we've moved to a WebKit browser open standards. Effectively what it means is we're able to run HTML5 now, we're able to run Flash, and we're able to port internet applications, whether that be a YouTube leanback, a Twitter, a Facebook, without complicated conversions and lag and latency. So true interactivity brought to the device with the really, well, we spent 3 years on the user interface, and we've worked with some of the best companies in the world. A company called Artifact out of Seattle did a lot of work on the Xbox to develop what we think will be the best-in-class user interface as well.
So this is effectively a PC that looks like a set-top box, right? So
that's exactly right.
That's what it's behaving as. So it sounds like there's been an awful lot of capital deployed to get to where you are, and that's obviously the benefit of having the shareholder that you have, or one of the shareholders that you have. How many subscribers are you able to talk about your current subscriber numbers and what the growth profile looks like?
So it is very early days for us. Our subscriber numbers, hopefully by the end of the month we'll have about 3,000. So it's, I'm very envious of the Telstra number.
Yep.
I can assure you that we're dimensioned to support the sort of monthly growth that Telstra has. If you take a look at where we are in our evolution, I guess what I would say is we're in phase 1. So it's a very soft launch, one ISP. It's a one-screen experience. It's just to the TV, and we're currently operating on our Gen 1 middleware and our Gen 1 UI. In the next 90 days, we're going to go through a very substantial change. On Tuesday of next week, we will zap those boxes and load new middleware, HTML5, and the speed of the service will increase exponentially. We will be launching in that time period with 4 more ISPs, Westnet, NetSpace, Atom, and Internode. And we will start to introduce true interactivity. Second half of the year, which is where you'll see us, hear us, and we'll be making some noise, we will introduce our 1 screen, our 1 foot and 2 foot, our tablet and our smartphone strategy. We will introduce some additional content, and hopefully 1, 2, or 3 of those partners we talked about before will join the coalition, and we'll welcome them with open arms.
Let's just talk about sport, and then I'm going to move to some questions, and then I want to talk about global trends in this market. So the media speculates at times that you're potentially a bidder for sports rights, and that comment has arisen in respect to AFL. I've seen it arisen in respect to NFL. Can you talk about whether you are a acquirer of sports rights, or any rights indeed? I mean, obviously you've got the movie rights, you've talked about VOD rights and linear channels, but there's an interesting kind of industry structure question here that's arising around whether there's a new dynamic, and clearly the rights holders are very ambitious for that. So can you talk about your plans and intentions in that space?
So the short answer is right now, probably not. In the future, probably. So let me just explain a bit. We look at a Foxtel All-Star, 30% of households, probably 80% have Fox Sports 1 and 2. And those people are very well served. They have their ESPN, Setanta, etc. So people that are prepared to pay for sports through a pay TV proposition are very well served, and we're unlikely to convince many or any of those 30% to move across to our platform. What we do recognize is that there are 70% who are not yet paying their first dollar for pay TV. Now, they've had 15 years to consider the pay TV offerings, some free installs, some free months, free movie package, etc., and they haven't taken it up. So our question is all about what do those individuals want? And clearly, they're very well served by free-to-air sport, some fantastic sport. So opportunistically, where sport linear channels are available, we will go in and get them. So we have Fox Sports News on the platform. We're talking to Setanta. We bought the rights to Manchester United channel, Chelsea channel, Man City channel, Real Madrid, Barcelona. So we're prepared to spend real money, but that's a long way from going into the AFL.
So that's good if you're a football fan.
Good if you're a football fan, and we're
but
getting
if you're
there.
into netball, or you watch that on 1HD, but
well,
AFL obviously free to wear.
So I think our aspirations, until we have distribution, until we have that coalition built, we're just not big enough to be relevant.
Okay, so it's a bit premature for the media to have speculated that you'd be acquiring the AFL rights in the next round.
I think there's a recognition that we are well funded, we are well backed. Our parent company has bought the expensive sports rights in each of their markets historically.
Right.
What I would say is what we'd like to do is we're more likely to work with a free-to-air broadcaster.
Yes. And
we're interested in scenarios where they're going to buy a code and they have an opportunity to, what used to be in the old list, sub-license to PMG, etc. If they want to actually have a subscription channel to complement their free-to-air coverage, we will give them carriage and actually share, if not all, most or all of the revenue.
So they could acquire the rights to domestic cricket, for example, and create a cricket channel. That's what you're effectively saying.
We'd love to have the 1HD cricket channel or the 9 NRL channel or the 7
Okay, so there's a new
channel.
dynamic that this opens up.
It is a different model.
Yep.
We would pay MGs for that.
MG is minimum guarantee. Sorry, yep.
But I think that opportunity is two to 3 years away.
Two questions. I'm going to go to the floor for a round of questions. So, if I may, first question is, what do Foxtel and Allstar think about FetchTV? How would they view you?
Not sure I'm the right person to be answering that, but look, I think one thing we've tried to do since we got here is there aren't a lot of secrets. I think anyone and everyone in this industry has been invited to come through, and we're certainly not operating in a black box. We're being very open about our model, our pricing, our wholesale structure. Our partners have audit rights. So we're very transparent in what we're trying to achieve. We are trying to partner with the industry where possible, and I certainly think it's fair to say that we're not targeting the incumbent bases. We're all after the same 70%, so there's overlap there. We think we've got the right proposition. Telstra's doing a great job. Xbox and Foxtel, there'll be lots of people, Hulu and Boxy, et cetera, that enter that space, Netflix. We're just one of those players. So
I want to come to Hulu and Roku and Netflix a little bit later, but what is the proposition to an Australian consumer today? If you were to say, FetchTV is, in a quick soundbite, what is that proposition?
Look, I think you've actually highlighted the biggest challenge we have, which is for those of people who've come in and experienced the service, you actually recognize it does a lot of things. Communicating that in a way that people can readily understand is a real challenge. And I think that if you ask me what keeps me awake at night, it's how the hell are we going to sell a new technology, a new product, a new brand, a new proposition, et cetera. It's a real marketing challenge. But in general, I think the way people should think of it is we are offering a suite of pay TV, a sub-suite, for somewhere between $25 and $29.95 per month. In that area comes the free PVR, fully subsidized, access to 30 free movies a month, plus all of the new release and mini library titles on a pay-per-view basis, great interactivity, and a fully integrated home theater experience. So we don't want to be a poor man's Foxtel. We're not pay TV with less to pay. We're about doing things differently. Today we actually had a very interesting chat. We get real-time ratings, so we can actually see in aggregate what everyone's doing at all times. I think that that's the sort of thing that you'd see us likely to actually share with consumers, because we're about changing the viewing experience. What's popular, what's top 10, what are people series tagging, what are they watching? We can communicate in a true two-way.
That's a level of transparency that the broadcast industry might be a little bit challenged by.
I think Channel 7 would be happy at the moment. They're doing pretty well.
Very interesting. Can we take a few questions from the floor? Sorry, okay. Scott, just for the benefit of anyone watching on the video cast, could you just repeat the question in your answer for us? Thank you.
Okay, so I think the question's really about when you're multicasting and you're effectively broadcasting a suite of, say, 30 channels into a home, do you offer the user the opportunity to customize? So from a pricing perspective, our basic package comes with that. We offer parental controls. We offer My Channel. You can set up your favorites list. So the ability to screen and parentally control is 100% there. From a personalization perspective as well, on the VOD content, our goal is to make as much available as possible. So in that environment, we push a lot of content to the set-top box. We push about 400 gigabytes a month of content to the set-top box. So that's preloaded each month on each set-top box. But we have a long tail available. So if you like Exit Through the Gift Shop or an art house type movie, that's going to be available to purchase. So you are able to access that on demand. We're not the only ones that do it, but we think the way in which we do it, the prices at which we do it, is quite unique.
There was one question. I saw an arm go just here.
Well, I guess the first point is you can't call us to get the product. So we are a wholesaler. So we have no customer. In fact, we don't even know the customer's addresses. We leave that to the ISP. They own that relationship. So if you're talking about a direct response marketing, that will be the exclusive domain of our ISP partners who do a wonderful job at it. We do recognize that we're going to have to build the brand. So no one's heard of this brand before. I don't think we would probably spend the sort of millions of dollars you need to do to launch a brand with just one ISP in the market. So we're going to benefit if the coalition comes together from the legitimacy, the credibility that comes with everyone in it together. So I think you can safely assume that there is a significant marketing budget which will be deployed once we have the coalition in place. And we're going to have to find a way to differentiate. The next generation of TV is going to be something that Samsung, Sony, Xbox, everyone's going to be out there trying to position their product. And we've got a really interesting marketing challenge, which is we don't want to be pay TV, but we don't want to just be another over-the-top web TV service. So we are spending quite a bit of time thinking about that brand positioning.
So you're a bit kind of like an Intel inside, really. I mean, you know.
We hate that, but yes,
hate that.
It's fair. It's fair. Yes, yes.
So do many others. Harris.
So we love Intel, but we just hate that. Look, great question. And I think one thing is we are trying to build this ecosystem. So if someone has a channel that they'd like to broadcast, unlike the satellite players where you've got a satellite transponder, you're talking about a very expensive exercise to get a linear channel to the home. The way in which we deliver effectively has zero incremental cost. So we have about 10 or 15 channels that we provide that we're provided free of charge that we put out. And if someone has an ad-funded channel that is attractive and exciting, we would carry it. In terms of rev share, we absolutely and very transparently, 50-50 rev share would be a model that we would pursue very aggressively. In terms of commissioning content, once again, we just don't have that scale. We would like to get in that space. Our parent company produces a lot of content in the region. We own Celestial Pictures, which is the largest distributor of Mandarin language film. Shaw Brothers Studio in Hong Kong produce a lot of content in Malaysia. Sun TV produces an enormous amount of content. So it is in our DNA to do that. I think you'll probably see us doing more on the ethnic foreign language side early because those markets are underserved. And I should say that, back to a question you asked me earlier, Martin, when we talk about how other people look at us, one of the things that makes us attractive to the content providers is we can service multi-dwelling units who have the satellite restrictions. And there are 1.5 million households in Australia that do not speak English at dinner. And those people are very underserved. The Hindi community, the Pakistani community, Mandarin from mainland China or from Taiwan, Singapore, Korea. We launched Korea today. We have Filipino launching next week. That's going to be a huge area of focus for us. And that allows content providers, even at Fox Sports News, to reach homes that haven't previously. I think we're probably 2 or 3 years away from actually funding original content. We would be part of a coalition and work with others to do that.
So Netflix, of course, recently provisioned some content. House of Cards, there you are. How much? $100 million, I think. So you're a few years away from that type of investment.
Yeah, we don't have a P&L, we have an L right now.
You have an L.
So
an L with no P. That sounds like a New Zealand drink to me. Questions on this side? Yeah, one right at the back there.
So the question was, I might take it in reverse order. Who owns the box? What happens when something goes wrong? And who provides the support to the customer? So our preferred model, the one we have in place with our existing partners, is that we own the box throughout the life of the customer. If something goes wrong, that box gets replaced. So exactly the same as you would expect from a Foxtel All-Star. And so there's a logistic process around that.
But different from a TiVo.
Very different from the TiVo. It's not a retail. This is a
retail
product
box.
Service for its useful life. If you're paying a subscription revenue, your box will be supported. One of the reasons we've been able to get to that really aggressive price point comes down to your question on service. We do not have, nor will we ever have, anyone with a team leader title in our business. And I used to have quite a few of them. But what we don't do is we do not sell service, technical support, billing, transmission, bad debt recovery. We do not do any of those customer-facing things. It takes an enormous amount of cost out of our business. Because we're an open book wholesale model, we can pass on those cost benefits to the ISP, who's already doing those things. TPGs on the back of the bus to add a third product would not take any additional cost. If you're selling 2 products on the phone, as Telstra does very well, to sell the third isn't very, very expensive. So the model is very much the customer is touched by the ISP, and we support the hardware.
Maybe one more question from this side, if we have. Unicast models for customized streams.
Yeah, so look, we plan to launch iView. We would like to launch with fixed play. If Hulu came into this market, we'd put it on the service. If you look at the Roku or the models from overseas, They're all putting the NBA channel or the Major League Baseball channel. Anything that's a unicast service. We're running a PC. It's just, it runs HTML, Flash, etc. So we're very happy to link to any unicast content. We recognize when we talk to the ISPs, they don't mind a bit of unicast. But if you push 30 linear channels, so if you take an example between us and the T-Box, and Telstra has thick enough pipes and enough capacity to do this, but if we have the same channel, so if they're launching Fox Sports News as an example, if there are 10,000 people in Sydney watching Fox Sports News on the T-Box, that is 10,000 individual connections with that channel. We would be broadcasting it one time. So our commitment to the ISPs is we're going to try to break the back of consumption through multicast, highly efficient, but certainly open up unicast. If we can get to an 80-20 model, that would be great.
Okay, let's just sort of move the conversation into some of the global trends around video distribution and content, and start with the consumer. So I'll start with me. I'm a consumer, oddly enough, and my favourite device is Apple TV. Probably many of you in this room have Apple TV. Many of you in this room probably have a US iTunes account. Can't believe you would do that, but anyway.
I've not heard of such things.
If you were, you'd be able to access leading serial content at substantially reduced prices in the Australian market, delivered to your TV set seamlessly. It's a pretty compelling user proposition. Yep. And when you combine that with the strength of free-to-air in this market and the protection around sport content, that's actually a pretty interesting kind of bundle, if you like, that I question whether, to that degree, as those devices begin to promulgate in the home, and of course you've mentioned Boxy, you've mentioned Roku, Google TV, when and if and as that's relevant in the Australian market, Hulu thinking about coming to Australia. We've got our friends from Quickflix over in Perth who are still looking to become the Netflix of Australia with all of its inherent challenges. You know, is that 70% market opportunity really going to be around for a long time?
Look, it's a great question. Fortunately, it's big enough for quite a few of us to survive, and we hope we're one of them. Look, I think to answer your question, there is no shortage of availability of content. So if you actually take a look at the long-form content consumed on the internet, 85 to 90% of it in the US and UK is free, either pirated or free model. You can get a device now, you can go and get content now. The question is it the content you want? Is it in the resolution that you want to the right device? Is it unmetered, and is it convenient? So that's a lot of words, but there's a huge checklist. And I think if you look at some of the studies, and I think actually you and I spoke about one of them, where if you take a person who's used to consuming pay TV or watching TV as a linear experience, and you give them a lot of widgets and the ability to go access lots of content, but they're going to have 3 or 4 billion relationships, one with Hulu Premium, one with Netflix, one with Major League Baseball, one with Amazon's program. The process of discovery, spending all of that time in a communal environment, trying to find it, managing the billion relationships, there's a high level of rejection on that model, and we believe that will continue to be the case. The other thing that a lot of those devices do is I call them parking meter TV. You know, if you want to see the first season of Mad Men, you will go online and find it and buy it. But in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, every week, you do not want to be paying for each individual piece of content that you take. So for us, there's an interesting matrix between how much linear content do people want and how much on demand. How much do they want to do on a pay-per-view basis, and how much do they want to include it in a subscription? I would argue that Australia is still well and truly in the quadrant of subscription linear, and a lot of people's commercial interests, and everyone would like to say it's pay-per-view on demand because more people can play in that market. But I just don't think there's any compelling evidence that that's the proposition that people want now. So we're placing a fairly big bet that there's a relationship between linear and on-demand, subscription and pay, and you know, we hope we get that right.
Do you think that leads to a world where we have one device, FetchTV box, that sits in our cabinet powering the television, or do we have a plethora of devices?
You have 3 FetchTV devices.
Or multiple FetchTV devices, and we have our tablets and our iPhones or whatever, but You know, is this concept of a one box fits all, which is what you're seeking to be, is that almost utopian in concept, or is it real?
No, I think there is a real opportunity to simplify. I went to the Consumer Electronics Show in 2001 in Las Vegas, and there's nothing that we're talking about today that you couldn't actually walk around and see then. It's not about doing it or what can technically be done. It's who can do it most simply, who can have a great interface, access to the content. It's all about the user experience. I think there's an opportunity to be that box from support the TV viewing, support the time shifting. Location shifting is a reality now. People will want to consume on their tablet device. They will want to consume on their mobile phone when they're traveling. And the more you can integrate those experiences, I don't think people want to consume that way as the dominant way. So if you take a look at the internet viewing of TV shows, long form, I think 65% of people say they do it because they missed the show. So they're just catching up, or they're traveling, it's more convenient. So I think we would believe the living room is the place to play, that one box can do it all, but you have to support the location shifting. And there will be things that people go online and find. It's just whether that will be the dominant experience.
Okay. Let's talk about the content creators or the content owners. So there's some interesting trends in the US now where the window to release on pay-per-view and VOD is shortening. That's upsetting the exhibitors, obviously, and in fact there's some cases where the major exhibitors are literally refusing to
the UK with Sherlock Holmes, or was one of those?
Yeah, is a good example of that. So what we're seeing now is a rush to get to that kind of mass customization through the VOD and pay-per-view window. How does that affect the market structure in Australia? So, probably not good news for Hoyts, I imagine, and Village Roadshow, who are trying to protect their exhibition businesses and their private equity, or in one case private equity owned. What's that kind of trend line as you're seeing it, and how's that potentially building to the Fetch proposition?
I think if you look at the release windows historically, you've got your theatrical release, and forgetting the airplanes and hotels, et cetera, that fall between. Then you move to your DVD sale, which is the most lucrative form of distribution for a content owner. Then you move into your DVD rental, and then the pay-per-view has historically been 45 days after the DVD sale, something in that attitude. I guess the first trend we're seeing right now, the quickest closing of the window, is between the pay-per-view, the DVD rental, and the DVD sale. So if you take Warner Brothers as an example, and Invictus as one of their movies, we would get the pay-per-view on the same day as the DVD rental, which is the same day as the DVD sale. Getting them to the Greek, which was a Universal film, same thing. We're getting Disney films now on day and date. So I think that what you're going to see very quickly is that delineation. Clearly the market for physical sales is drying up, 15% per year down. They've got to restore that opportunity. The growth market is pay-per-view, digital sales. So you're going to see that day and date DVD sale, pay-per-view window be the same. The next question is then, how does that encroach on the theatrical window? It's probably not an area that I'm as experienced in as the other one, but I think there will be some creepage, but the prices will go up. So you're going to pay a lot more if you want to get a film close to, and in some cases you can actually get them in the US before theatrical release.
Right, but it's priced at a premium too.
Priced at a premium.
Right, okay. It's interesting. It's sort of like a yield pricing
You'd
model.
never believe this, but it's a healthy premium as well.
A healthy premium, yeah. What's your understanding and expectation of Hulu's presence in the Australian market?
I personally think it makes great sense that the free-to-airs would all have a single catch-up TV platform. I think as a user myself, I think we'd all, rather than going to iView, Fixed Play, 9MSN service, etc., if that was all available in one place, that would be great. And we would be the first knocking down the door to offer our customers access to that service. It's always challenging for the free-to-airs to get in bed together. I guess the question...
They're not exactly chummy, mate, at the moment,
yeah, there's a few things going on, I understand. I've read the media section. But I think one of the challenges, I guess the question for Hulu, is what value are they bringing to that relationship? Because anyone can do a content management system or can put together an iPlayer or an iView, etc. The free-to-airs already have the content. Do they really want to, and if you take a 7, for example, they've got to split revenues with Yahoo, or 9 with Microsoft. To split the revenues 3 ways or 4 ways, and then split them with an overseas party as well. I think the economics, if you look at the size of the prize, A, there isn't as much yield and the CPMs in catch-up are obviously far less than in broadcast. But if you have to split it 50-50, then 4 ways, and then give 30-40% to an overseas player, you got to wonder why you're doing it. So I think one of the big limitations to that model has historically been the economics. You're cannibalizing yourself, you're sharing it a lot of different ways, and you're dealing with people that you might not trust on a day-to-day basis. So I'd like to see it. We hope it happens.
But you're dubious, I sense. TiVo in the Australian market hasn't really succeeded.
I'd like their numbers. Look, I think TiVo, the way we look at TiVo is, at the time it was introduced in the market, it was the best PVR available. It has a great interface, but it was sold as a PVR with an EPG. So I don't think that the transactional element of TiVo, I certainly wouldn't rate the process of buying a film and watching it on TiVo. But if you're using it as a PVR, it's great. So I think the question, if you look at TiVo as a retail product, what is the future of a $500-600 PVR when Telstra is giving them for nothing? Our partners are giving them for nothing. Is it still best-in-class hardware? The user interface, I don't think anyone could deny it's a good user interface. But that price point, you know, Australians, they won't even pay for an aerial when they're free-to-air receptions for. To go out and spend $600 on a PVR, I wouldn't want to be in that space.
Right. So what is the biggest competitive threat that you see on your immediate horizons?
Look, we've lost a lot of sleep over the last 3 years. So first it was, can you get the content? And we've de-risked with lots of sleepless nights and lots of plane rides that issue. The next thing is set-top box, middleware, UI, it's not easy. So if you look around the world, you know, I think Singtel's probably not done the best job. If you look at BT delaying their launch, some of the challenges, I think Google missed the Consumer Electronics Show this year. When we talk to people, whether they're using Motorola, Cisco, all of these different platforms, it's really tricky. And there are lots of challenges. So getting the product to work, and our product's not going to be the point to which we're ecstatic with it for another 90 days or so. So it's hard. I think Telstra would tell you the same. So we think we've de-risked that side. The next thing we got to de-risk is distribution. I wouldn't mind a couple more big guys. And then we'll sleep again for a night. And then we'll stress about the marketing messages and how the hell we convince consumers to take the product. Okay,
so then my last question, I'm going to go back to the floor, is, and let's sort of fast forward then for, say, 3 years. What's FetchTV? If you had your or your dream outcomes arise, what's FetchTV look like in 3 years' time?
I guess I usually get the questions framed usually differently. For me, it's usually to keep your job, what do you need to do? So look, we would be targeting, you know, big numbers. We would hope to have 500,000 subscribers plus within 4 or 5 years. We're certainly dimensioned for that. One point I haven't made, but I will make, is one of the reasons that we're spending tens of millions of dollars in R&D, and we're able to in this market, is we have 2 missions in life. One is to be a successful IPTV wholesale model in Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. The second is we have to support our sister companies in Asia, in India, in Malaysia, in Sri Lanka, in Brunei, in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, etc. And we are the IPTV incubator of the technology, the middleware, the hardware, etc. for those groups. So we actually are funded principally by our sister companies. So for us to be successful, not only do we need to be successful in Australia, but if we're not, if we just break even here, we could still be extremely successful because our home ground is Asia. We're here to help our sister companies. We'll be launching in the next 2 months in one of our sister companies in one of those markets. So we'd like to have our cake and eat it too. We'd like to fulfill that ambition of developing technology for the group. We'd like to take that a step further and partner with companies in China and Eastern Europe and Latin America, etc. But we'd also like our home resident market.
That's a good point. It would be great export success for Australia to have a company that can successfully do that. So good luck in that mission. Can we take some more questions from the floor? And there's one right at the back that often don't get to stick their hand up, so there you go.
It's a great question, which is, do you need the set-top box? Is there any future? And I think a lot of people say it's just going to all be done through the TV. A personal comment, I guess, and there are a lot of smarter people than me at our offices. I'm just here tonight, but the real stars are back at the office. But you know, a display device is a 12-year obsolescence curve. a set-top box is a 4-year. We purchased a Broadcom 7413 chipset, and that's what we went to market with because we thought it was the best chipset in the market. We've already got our eyes on the next chipset. We actually brought 3,000 boxes into the market with 720 gigabyte hard drives, and before we launched, we switched to 1 terabyte. So there is a logic that says you actually do want to decouple the set-top box from, a lot of it comes down to what your belief of actually PVRs in the cloud and some of the legalities around copyright, et cetera. The other thing is we are all about being closed network delivered. So if we were on a Samsung TV and you went in and bought it and put it into a home that's not our partner, we're not able to provide our service because we need a closed network quality of service guaranteed. So the box is also a form of serviceability check. It's a way for the ISP to own the relationship. A segue to that question is, will we ever want to retail? Why don't Fetch just go straight to Samsung, Sony, to Xbox or PlayStation? We picked our religion. We are all about helping the ISPs, and that model is not an ISP agnostic model. We are in bed with the ISPs.
Harris again.
I think the second point, which is, aren't the TV companies motivated to actually put that technology? I think they've certainly tried to get us back in the shops with 3D, but I don't think that one's gone to plan. I think historically the TV manufacturers have avoided scenarios where they're going to actually do some brand damage by putting high obsolescence risk technology in with expensive devices. That may change. The first question was Google TV. Actually, Martin's worked with us as an advisor, and Google TV is so hard to understand and to explain. I was going to ask you what you think, but look, I think if you look at Google TV, and they're all very similar. They're providing a way to search internet content and link with companies like Netflix, like Hulu Premium, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the question is, are consumers going to tolerate multiple billing relationships as a question? Are they going to be prepared to search as the means, is the behavior going to, from changing channels or looking at things to actually actively going? In my house, if I do something with the remote for more than 3 seconds, I have 3 people yelling at me to get on with it. And I think that there's a reality that the living room is communal. And if you're designing a PC or search experience where deep navigation into the living room, at the divorce rate's going to go straight through the roof. Yeah, I'm embarrassed I have to answer this question because it's not the answer I would normally want to give. But the question is, how much consumer research did we do in coming about the proposition? I have a marketing background, product development, et cetera. Normally there's a way in which you do these things. We are probably the only product I've ever heard of that was actually reverse engineered off a price point. And what I mean to say is, we went around and talked to the ISPs and said, we really want to be your partner. What do you need? And they said, well, we need a $99 triple play, which is your broadband, your telephony, your home phone, your local calls, your national calls, and your pay TV for $99. Math leaves you about $29, $25. In that, you've got to cover GST, you've got to cover your margin, you've got to cover our margin, and it's got to be as good or better than Telstra's. So that was, it actually forced an amazing discipline on the team at Fetch, which is we just didn't have every penny mattered. So our content budget, which I disclose freely in the industry, we spend about $9.80, including levies, on our content because we've got to cover the set-top box, we've got to cover a range of different middleware licenses, et cetera. So we sat down and said, what's the best product we can build to help the ISPs go to market with a triple play proposition? We actually think we got to a great place, so we're very proud of it. In terms of the ecosystem, where it fits is, we think we're going to ride the PVR wave. We think having the best PVR is key there. We think that people will consume their movies digitally at home without going to the video store. So having that entire service was there. And then we're not trying to replicate. We actually love what the free-to-airs are doing. If the free-to-airs are going to, ABC 24 is going to launch a 24-hour news channel, then we don't need to buy Sky News because we've only got less than $10 to spend. So we try to identify the categories of content that people want more of than what the free-to-air are giving them. So international news, business news, documentaries, biographies, music channels, more movies, etc. So we're trying to be that entertainment option that's cool, that's fun, that's safe, big brands, things all for that 25 as part of a $99 triple play. Oh, it's a great question about advertising. So our religion right now, I can tell you candidly that our 5-year plan does not have a dollar for advertising. We're not unaware of where the opportunity might arise. All of our SVOD content, so if your children are watching 6 episodes in a row of Bob the Builder, Thomas the Tank Engine, Angelina Ballerina, it's all commercial free. So all of our SVOD content is currently provided commercial free. The free to airs, we hope that people continue to watch the free to airs so that they will produce great content that people will consume on Fetch. And we're very happy. We don't want to get involved in their advertising model. I think there's a legitimate question about pre-roll and post-roll. More interesting to us than advertising is data. So we think we're going to actually be able to play a very meaningful place in terms of adding value to the consumers, but to the advertisers, the media buyers. And we'd actually like to be working with the free-to-airs and the programmers about what are people watching, where do they come from, what are the correlations, et cetera. I think in reality, we are consuming some of your bandwidth into the home. We don't think you'd notice. And if you're not watching a linear channel, we're not competing. So yes, there is some degree of capacity reduction in having a Fetch service. You can turn it off, you can slow it down, you can do whatever so it's controllable. But it's a price. If you have 3.5 million people have 8 megabits per second into the home. If we take 2 of that, the difference between 6 and 8 is not a particularly big number.
Will the set-top box move to the cloud inevitably?
There are some very interesting legal questions, and there's a court case in the U.S., a court case in Singapore, and there's a few people doing that right now. So I think we're gonna follow this space with great interest. I think that there is every prospect that a lot of the recording will move into the cloud, but then again, to not breach copyright, you're actually taking a copy from the home, putting it to the cloud, and then bringing it back. So if you're talking about network efficiency, if we're multicasting and we're recording off the terrestrial signal, and the alternative is to save it in the cloud twice up and down, I think you can understand. The ISPs have a huge issue right now. We're up to 6 megabits per second, 6 gigabytes per month per user. It's doubled in 2 years. Our broadband networks were not built for the amount of rich video that's going over them. So in a post-NBN world, I think it's in the cloud. In a pre-NBN world, I really can't see that being the dominant solution.
Final question.
If you look at the newspapers, they've made their content available for free and are now having difficulty monetizing it. If you look at the music providers, they didn't make it available quickly enough, and now they're having a difficulty getting it back from piracy. So there is this tension between protecting your commercial model and facilitating piracy. I think that a lot of this goes back to the content players. How do they support the way that consumers wanted to purchase content? We think we're playing an important role because if you've got an easy interface to use, the content's readily available, you can get everything you want. I think Australians have demonstrated that they're very prepared and they would prefer to consume legally, or at least the vast majority of them. So I guess it's 2 things. We need the sort of devices and services that allow people to do things easily and broadly. And second, the content providers need to consider their windowing, consider their pricing structures, and remove the demand side of that. And I'm very pleased you're enjoying your Fetch service.
Excellent, well done. Nice segue. I'm going to pass back to Sally. I'm first of all going to thank you, Scott, for joining us on the couch here tonight. So well done and thank you very much. Couple of quick comments to make. I think you've got one of the most interesting jobs in the media world in Australia right now, because the dynamics and the issues and the complexities and what you're dealing with are immense. Putting a coalition together as NATO is determining is difficult in the best of times and difficult in a world where you've got all those multiple layers of complexity you're dealing with. So we wish you well. Hope it goes well for Fetch. It obviously will help stimulate the market and competition, and I'm sure in years to come, hopefully we'll have you back and hear the story of how Fetch has unfolded.